Hi everybody, happy Tuesday. We are going live with Dr. Marcus Ranney. I am so excited. Give me a second. I'm spelling his name wrong. I'm going to introduce him in a second, the moment. Awesome. All right. How do I need him as a guest. Okay, sorry, give me a second. All right, awesome. He's here. Hi, Dr. Marcus. How are you? Can you hear me?
I can. How are you?
I am good. So good to have you here. This is fabulous. Thank you.
No, it's a pleasure. I don't think I've done one of these since the pandemic.
Have you not? So this is our monthly thing because then I just posted and everyone, no one has to get onto any other platform. They've
Yeah,
got this to view it and do whatever with it.
sure.
So it's great. Thank you for doing this and it's amazing. Good to have you here.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. So I'm going to quickly introduce you because I absolutely love what you've done so far. And I'm going to talk about a little bit about, why this is of so much interest to me as somebody who runs Brain Bristle, which is a foundation for the spectrum of autism. So I'll quickly talk about you and then I'll talk about Brain Bristle's work in similar fields. And then we'll just get started with the questions and I'm sure it's going to be great. Can you hear me? You're freezing a little bit, um, but I'm hoping you can. Wait, I think we lost you. Sorry, guys. Give me a second. Yeah, are you back?
Yeah, I'm
Awesome.
back.
Sorry,
I'm
I
back.
think we lost you for a second there. Amazing. So I'm going to quickly get started. So Dr. Marcus is a longevity physician. He's dedicated to overwhelmed, high-performing performers and CXOs, which I think I know so many people who are these days. He spent over 2 decades forging a transformative path in healthcare. His journey began with a Bachelor's of Science and Medical degrees from University College Medical School in London, which led him to, go and climb Mount Kilimanjaro, Everest. He's done all kinds of global adventures. He's been a medical officer in the Royal Air Force, to NASA's Kennedy Space Center. His career has just been like a complete pursuit of excellence. In 2010, which was about 14 years ago, he moved to Bombay, becoming a strategic advisor and investor in the healthcare and life sciences industry, contributing to some major global players. The pandemic kind of got him to frontline work, from medical volunteering to founding the not-for-profit Meds for More, which I'm really excited to hear about more. Today, Dr. Marcus is at the forefront of longevity sciences, spearheading Human Edge and investor-backed digital healthcare. We'll talk a little bit more about that in our chat, which basically focuses on leveraging blood and digital biomarkers to create a personalized and bio-individual longevity protocol.
Hmm.
For admissions, the core of his work involves hacking the human operating system for longevity, utilizing the power of biomarkers. As somebody who does a lot of spoken word poetry and does a lot of talking, that's really exciting to me. We've chat today about about his work in shaping a future where health and performance go hand in hand, and how those insights could actually help shape our study, Dr. Marcus, but even autism, because as you know, it's a big spectrum of the DSM, where you've got severe to mild to Asperger's to savants. And what I've seen in my journey of 16 years of working with autism, studying autism, is that when you're propelling somebody forward on the spectrum of autism, there are food sensitivities, there are triggers, there are lots of meltdowns, there's a lot of like forging forward and falling behind, and there's lags. But when I've studied people on the spectrum of autism, they say Mozart is on the spectrum of autism. Elon Musk recently came on Saturday Night Live and said he's Asperger's. And, there are rumors that Bill Gates might have been on the spectrum of autism. So there's like a lot of talk in about the spectrum of autism. But when I've studied lives of people on the spectrum of autism. Even Hannah Gadsby is a very, very well-known British comedian. You
Hmm.
see their journeys as, almost like a pursuit of longevity, which is self-driven, societal-driven, and it's really interesting to me that the journeys that they go through and the struggles they make it through, and how they would have been different if there would be somebody like you guiding their way along. So that just intrigues me and interests me. So we'll kind of like talk about your work, and I'm sure people who listen to it from an autism point of view might just find some aha moments on their own without us getting too much into it, because I know that's not your field. I'm actually really keen on your work. So just I've given a brief introduction of you. You could kind of talk about your journey, your work, anything that we missed out.
Oh, I think that's an excellent overview. Thanks so much. Firstly, thank you for having me because when you reached out a while ago, I was so pleased to be able to contribute in whatever minor way that I can to this conversation. As a father of two young kids, we are very well aware of how large this problem is, how it's growing. The neurodiversity conversation
Right.
is receiving acceptance globally,
Yeah.
and it needs to be completely destigmatized,
Right.
defragmented, and for these sort of conversations to be opened up as much as possible. So,
Right.
whilst I very much spend my time in the world of high performance and longevity,
Right.
I hope some of those learnings might potentially percolate down and across, therefore, to folks who are being impacted on the neurodiversity scale as well.
Right. Right. Yeah, so I'm hoping that. I think it's like stretching the human mind and the human body's potential.
Yeah.
I think that similarity is across many fields. So I'm super excited. So let's kind of just start with, I'm curious to know, why did you leave your job as a medical officer? Because that sounds super interesting with NASA and doing all of that, and make the transition to India, to coaching high performing CXOs, begin your work on longevity. What was that journey like?
Um,
The change in the
yeah.
transition.
So, there were probably two or three key moments along that journey. I think the first was the beginnings of my career, the first sort of 4 or 5 years was very much immersed in high performance, extreme physiology, the work that I was able to be exposed to through my time at the Royal Air Force. Then through the opportunities I had working with the emergency services and with the space program, it really allowed me to play in this incredible sandbox of human performance, extreme performance, and
Right.
extreme physiology. I think my first aha moment was actually when I then sort of transitioned to become a physician.
Yeah.
And believe my first three jobs as a house officer in London were intensive care, urology, and geriatric medicine. So just imagine the mental model that I have. The first one being individuals who can summit Everest, individuals who are fighter pilots, individuals who are astronauts, individuals who are Olympians.
Yeah.
And that understanding and frame of the human body. And
Yeah.
then going all the way to the other side,
Right.
working with people who are comatose, ventilated, fully supported in ICU,
Right.
geriatrics, etc. So that was a paradox in my mind that
Yeah.
just didn't work at all. I
Yeah.
became very, very disenfranchised with that, and therefore I decided to make a change. And one of the
Oh.
changes I decided to do was actually to relocate. Oldest story in the book, I followed a girl, and I ended up moving to India. We're now married and we have two kids. And when I transitioned to India, I was not able to, or not able to access and work in the same sort of clinical environment as I was doing in the UK.
Yeah.
And that's when I started to get exposed to some of the more business management and wider aspects of health in investment,
Yeah.
in management consulting, etc. Right. So that was sort of the one big transition area. I think the second, which really led me to what I do now, fundamentally happened in the pandemic,
Right.
which was whilst I was a frontline volunteer, I was working so I live in Mumbai and I was working for the BMC, which is our local corporation. as a doctor in the screening effort. So literally going slum door to slum door within some of the largest slums and lower socioeconomic housing estates that we have in the city, and identifying patients who probably had COVID. This is the time before we had RT-PCR testing,
Wow.
very clinical and history led.
Yeah.
So that's sort of what the work I was doing. But then, unfortunately, after about 4 or 5 months of doing that work, I contracted the virus myself, the original strain. I became very unwell. I had the multilobar pneumonia. I had a neurological complication which affected my lower limbs. And so
Oh
I had to
God.
then go through my own journey of
Yeah.
rehabilitation and
Yeah.
recovery, getting off
Right.
steroids, getting off antimicrobials,
Yeah.
antivirals, etc.
Yeah.
And it was in that journey that I discovered for myself personally the power of biohacking, the power of lifestyle, holistic change to heal the human body from the inside out,
Yeah.
addressing root cause and not
Yeah.
symptom.
Right.
And that led me to my journey at Human Edge. So those are sort of the two big moments that I had in my career.
That's amazing. I absolutely love that. That's beautiful. The fact that you kind of made your own journey, and the fact that you moved to India for a woman you loved, I think that's those two things kind of show longevity in cool ways. Okay, so talking about now you're in India, you've gone through your own journeys to now be possibly guide your people who you guide better. Um, I'm always very curious, Dr. Marcus, about gut microbiomes and maternal health.
Yeah.
I don't know how much of you worked with that, but I know that you have done a lot of work with, just microbiomes. So I'm curious to know, because a lot of studies and papers say it is a woman's, like there's some genes that the child carries from a mom that lead to autism and, maternal health and things like that. What have you seen in your journey? How much does maternal health actually impact the child? What can a mother do for safekeeping of her, across different economic, socioeconomic stratas? How can a mother keep her body and self safe? And really, would that have an impact in the way that we would want? Just like, I'm curious to hear
Yeah.
the role that microbiomes play.
So as I'm not an expert in the space of sort of neurodevelopmental
Right,
disorders, what I
right.
can sort of contribute is my experiences on longevity and high performance. If I look
Yeah,
at the longevity paradigm first, one of the single biggest reasons why we've seen such a massive enhancement in longevity globally. So since
yeah,
1960 to 2019, there has been an average of 19 years extension of lifespan, number of
right,
years lived. Many
right.
countries like India, it's been much more. In
Yeah,
India, since our independence in 1947, we've seen almost a 21, 22 year increase, if not more, probably 25 plus years increase in life expectancy. And the biggest two contributing factors are a reduction in maternal mortality rate and a reduction in infant mortality rate as well. So the efforts that globally we've done to enhance maternal health have contributed very, very significantly to our ability to live longer. Okay, so that's a very important facet. Now, the gut microbiome, I'm now thinking back 20 years ago when I was in med school. I don't even think we had it mentioned to us, maybe towards the tail end in a passing lecture, perhaps. That's how new this body of science really is. Before that, we didn't really understand it. Now, what is the gut microbiome? I'm sure your listeners and viewers have understood
yeah,
some of this with some of your previous
yeah,
conversations. It is
yeah.
a bidirectional axis, the
Uh,
brain and the gut. So we now call it the gut-brain axis, right?
right.
The brain sends messages downward, infiltrating the gut tissue, and the gut sends messages upward to influence decisions and the neurochemistry within the brain itself. Embryologically, it has both evolved and originated from the same structure within the early blastocyst that forms inside of the womb when the ova and the sperm come together. So they're both very tightly coupled with one another. In fact, outside of the central nervous system, it is the gut that contains the most number of neurons in the human body. Right? So it's a very, very well innovated and richly dense network of nervous tissue which sits inside of our gut. Now, what has happened evolutionary is that over our period of development, we have actually started to engulf and take in microorganisms from the outside world that reside inside of us. And it
Mm,
is not a parasitic relationship. It is
mm,
not that it just eats what we give it and that's the end of it. It is a symbiotic relationship. We feed the microbiome feeds us. If we don't take care of the microbiome will not take care of us physically, mentally, and emotionally as well. So the collection of organisms that we have, the numbers vary anywhere between 10 million to 100 million to maybe even a trillion organisms inside of our gut, up to about 3 kilograms of substance. That's how much of it exists within us. And all of the things that we consume and the food that we put into our gastrointestinal tract are broken down, are digested, and ultimately metabolized and released back into the bloodstream. And they're influenced by the microbiome. Now, the microbiome is
mm,
something which is influenced from the moment that we are inside our mother's womb. The
mm.
exposure, the circulating organisms that are there inside of the amniotic fluid from the mother herself starts to impregnate and influence our microbiome that we have.
Mm,
An individual who is born through a natural delivery, so coming out through the vaginal canal,
mm,
has a
mm.
very different microbiome to that which is born by a cesarean section because
Right.
that's an asterile environment. There's a cut made in the uterus. The first contact
Yeah.
that baby has is the latex gloves of the surgeon reaching in and taking it out. And that can have massive downstream effects in a health trajectory of a human being.
Mm, mm,
Then the microbiome that exists on the skin flora of the mom and the dad, which is why babies are encouraged to have skin to skin contact with both parents as soon as they're born. And of course, the microbiome which exists inside of the breast tissue, inside of the lactate, which is being provided, the colostrum, to the baby. And like this, the story goes on and on and on. And over the period of time, over years, we then develop our own microbiome in conjunction with pets that we have at home, with our life partner that we share the environment with our friends, with our environmental spaces at the office, etc. All of this influences our microbiome. And these microbiome can then either work for us or against us. And one of the theories which have now increasingly becoming more accepted is that it is the health and condition of the microbiome that could potentially lead to the development of neurodevelopmental disorders like
right.
autism, etc. And that's why looking after gut health is just so
Can
important.
I can I ask you a question? So
Yeah.
so basically, Dr. Marcus, over the last, let's say, 40 years, we've seen autism numbers rising like we've never seen before, right? So the one reason could be that there's overdiagnosis, more awareness, more scanning, and more all of that. But there's a lot of talks also that another reason is because of the just the global environment that we're living in. We're so exposed to everything. We're constant, foods and everything that's coming into our bodies is just not what it used to be 60 years ago, 50 years ago, 40 years
Yeah.
ago. How
Yeah.
much do you think our gut microbiome has got influenced by the changing environment, by the changing places that we're living in?
I think it's been influenced very significantly. I mean, in addition to the spectrum of disorders on the neurodevelopmental spectrum, we're
Yeah.
also seeing a massive surge in autoimmune
Huh.
conditions, atopy, hay fever, asthma, rheumatoid disease, scleroderma, so many of these disorders increasing in incidence, primarily because of changes that are happening in our immune system, primarily because of the environment which is affecting us externally and internally as well. I mean, people
Right.
need to appreciate that the gut,
Hmm.
which is officially defined as the passage from mouth to anus, is a
Hmm.
hollow tube, roughly 22, 23 meters long, and that is in continuous contact with the outside world at both ends, right? It's
Totally.
as if we as a human being are a cylinder, and inside of us we have another cylinder, which is the gut, which is open at both ends. So as the environment changes outside, it's going to influence what's inside that inner cylinder, and
Yeah.
that's therefore what the microbiome is.
Oh, that's really interesting.
Antibiotic
Yeah. Yeah.
antibiotic utilization, which has now gone through the roof,
Totally.
contributing to antimicrobial resistance patterns,
Yeah.
is a massive reason why we have alterations in the gut. In fact, some of the studies which have been published even over the last 12 to 18 months have looked at child exposure below the age of 2
Hmm.
to heavy forms of antibiotics, the
Hmm.
effect it has had on their microbiome, and their probability of then developing neurodevelopmental disorders thereafter. So, all
Amazing.
young parents who are
Yeah.
listening to this really have to be very, very conscious
Yeah.
of not reaching out for an antibiotic every time your child has an illness. If it's a viral illness, it is going to have zero effect except completely stripping out the microbiome of your child's gut and potentially leading to two consequences: microbiome divergence and antimicrobial resistances, both of which are very dangerous.
Wow. Yeah. Just like such important stuff that thank God you like I'm so glad that you're talking about this because I think we do a lot of stuff in our daily lives that we're just not aware of. So this level of medical self-awareness is just I think really important. So talk a little bit about your NGO, Dr. Marcus. I'm curious about the work that does and did you start it during the pandemic and what does it do?
We started it on this desk. My wife and I, we were both significantly involved in various efforts during the pandemic, as I was sharing. And on the 1st of April, 2021, a member of our household staff knocked on the door. His son had been diagnosed with COVID and he needed some financial assistance to buy the medicines.
Hmm.
Remember, at that point in time, the medicines were frightfully expensive because there was hoarding, there
Hmm.
was unfortunate human behaviors associated with that. And there was just so much demand that the supply became so restrictive
Yeah.
and it
Yeah.
wasn't available. So rather than give him financial support, we actually thought that in our apartment building where we live,
Hmm.
I was looking after three individuals who were coming out of COVID. So I just made a couple of calls and I said, hey guys, I know you've got some leftover medicines in the packets.
Hmm.
Send it to me and I'll make that available to the gentleman whose son needs it. And it
Hmm.
was in that moment that we realized, hang on, there's something here. Why waste when we have such a scarcity of medicines for this
Hmm.
particular condition?
Hmm.
And there are so many different types of medicines that are required. So
Hmm.
we sort of conceptualized this idea, a Robin Hood army, sort of, where we take from the haves and we give to the have-nots only medicines that were unexpired and unused. And it
Hmm.
started in one building, it spread to one area of Bombay, it spread to one city, it spread to 12 cities.
Hmm.
And in the course of about 3, 4 months, we had tens of
Hmm.
thousands of volunteers across the country. Practically every state in the country had this effort going on. And it just became a national movement because it was so simple. It was
That's so,
using something
that's
that
so
you
simple.
had and you just had to give it to someone who didn't have
Right.
it.
Right.
Um, and it served a purpose during the pandemic. Now, of course, it has withdrawn in terms of scale.
Hmm.
Still in
Hmm.
the city of Bombay, we have a few collection centers.
Hmm.
We have a few NGOs that we contribute support to in terms of medication. But
Hmm.
what I'm most happy about is
Hmm.
that this seed of thought has been
Hmm.
sown. And now, anywhere in the country, anyone knows about this idea that I've got leftover medicines or leftover supplies, let me
Hmm.
give it to someone who needs it as opposed to letting it waste away in a drawer or throw it away in the dustbin.
That's
And
awesome.
that's been the big learning for all of us.
That is awesome. I love that. That's amazing. What a great idea. Okay, so just moving forward, I want to talk a little bit about your work with longevity in some detail and depth. So Dr. Marcus, when we see children on the spectrum of autism and they're being propelled forward and they're going through adolescence and puberty and all of that, what we see is there's a lot of symptoms of anxiety, OCD, behavioral outbursts, food and environment sensibility, self-harm, self-deprecation, self-loathing, like you're right, from emotional to intellectual to physical changes that they're going through, and that causes a lot of stuff. They wean out of those. Sometimes they don't, and that kind of sometimes impacts their growth. I'm just curious, in your experience with working with high performer, overwhelmed high performers, with CXOs, with you've done expeditions yourself. What have you seen as some emotional, intellectual, physical barriers that people go through, and how do they overcome that? And what's your work with that?
I think, irrespective of one's seniority or position, we're all the
Yeah.
same. We
Right.
all
Right.
just want to be loved. We all want to feel needed. We all want to feel part of a community. We all want to feel that we are contributing to a mission or purpose in some way. And
Yeah.
if we aren't heard and if we can't be heard,
Yeah.
then we
Yeah.
feel frustrated and
Yeah.
angry and anxious, and it can manifest itself in a whole variety of different ways. I focus my efforts on, four or five. Actually, I have five key pillars when it comes to longevity and performance. It's actually very simple.
Hmm.
It's sleep, eat, move, breathe, and connect. That's how basic healthy living is. We
Hmm.
always start with sleep, and this is equally important in anyone on the spectrum as well. Your body needs rest. Rest is
Right.
the period of time where your brain develops, your emotional health develops, your physical health develops, etc.
Yeah.
Very,
Yeah.
very important in children as well. So
Yeah.
we always look at sleep behaviors, sleep routine, sleep hygiene. We measure sleep using some of the wearable devices, and then we optimize for that.
Yeah.
Then we look at the second pillar, which is eat. And the rules about eating are very simple. It's got to be real food, so nothing that comes out of a packet or a bottle. It's got
Hmm.
to be sustainable. You should be able to eat this food over the course of your lifetime and not it be a fad which you're dipping in and out of, and therefore it's unlikely to have a long-term effect.
Hmm.
And it needs to be balanced. It needs to have the right macronutrients, and it needs to be enriched with the right micronutrient support as well, right? So we look at those aspects of the individual and calibrate that for them. The third is
Hmm.
movement. Our body is a machine. Every
Hmm.
machine is made to move. It needs to move aerobically, it needs to move anaerobically. My
Hmm.
cousin just messages, don't talk about sleep because he's had a little baby girl, so he's not having a good sleep time right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so we need to move, we need to have muscle mass, resistance
Yeah.
training, flexibility, and balance, right? So that's where the movement piece comes in. Then it's about breathe, and breathe is all about stress management, physical
Yeah.
stress, environmental stress, mental stress, and the ability for us to be comfortable being uncomfortable,
Right.
using stress biologically to our advantage and
Yeah.
managing the fight and flight response. So we teach
Right.
people different behavioral techniques, we teach them different breathing techniques, we expose them to different recovery techniques to manage and mitigate the stress response and
Right.
improve and optimize recovery.
Right.
And then the last, which is so important as a human, is connect. Connect with
Yeah.
people, connect with
Yeah.
the environment,
Yeah.
connect with nature and the world at large. And if you
Yeah.
get these five pillars aligned and structured well, you're
Yeah.
there. That is your
Yeah.
blueprint for
That's so.
longevity and high performance.
Yeah. So can I ask you a question?
Of course.
How does this differ for a high performing CXO or somebody who's like an overwhelmed high performer? Uh, how much, like, what do you amp up? What do you tailor for somebody who's bigger up, like who's
So
working towards higher goals?
it's actually the structure remains the same. It is the devil is in the details. So we are an n equals one. Your biology is fundamentally different to mine. Your genetics are different. Your microbiome is different. The expression of your genes are different. Your phenotype is different. Your culture and your preferences are different, right? So I can't just take the same rules that I would apply to me and put
Hmm.
them on your physiology and psychology and
Correct.
expect you to have the same degree of outcome, therefore.
Correct.
So,
Correct.
whilst our structure, our protocol
Hmm.
remains exactly the same, through
Hmm.
the measurement that we do across all these different biological markers, blood,
Hmm.
urine, stool, microbiome, wearable
Hmm.
data, digital data, functional data, imaging data, genetic data,
Hmm.
epigenetic data, etc. We've got this massive stack of biology and physiology that we're measuring. And once we
Hmm.
consume all of that, we then develop the rule-based framework for them to execute on and support them during that journey if they need it, for them to be a healthier version today and for themselves tomorrow.
Right. Right. Okay, so can I ask you a little bit about today? These days, we live in this big age of everybody's talking about mental health and anxiety, and all kinds of depression and all of that. Like it's ADHD. All of these feel like they've kind of like when I was growing up, I didn't hear too much of this, but in the last 20 years, there's just like been a big pop up of that. Can you talk a
Yeah.
little bit about things like anxiety, depression, OCD, and what do you think? I mean, is it the same stuff that you would recommend, or what and how?
The pillars would remain exactly the same. I think the only difference I would say is that the clinical relevancy will include whether that individual is also then managed by a psychologist, a counselor, or in some cases a psychiatrist if
Yeah.
required. Otherwise, the structural pillars remain the same. I think given that we started on the conversation of the microbiome, it's
Mm.
very important and interesting perhaps for our listeners to perhaps pick up a book called The Better Brain. It's
Yeah.
written by two incredible ladies, Julia Ruckledge and Bonnie Kaplan, and
Mm.
it's nutrition above the neck. And they fundamentally talk about the role of micronutrients and the microbiome and gut health towards improving psychological health and performance as well. One of the studies which I remember them talking about when I hosted them on my podcast was that they compared the gold standard, which is CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, to individuals who are just being supplemented with the optimal dosages of 30 essential micronutrients that our brain and our body requires.
Mm.
And they found that there was a 30 plus percent improvement in psychological parameters in the
Mm.
group that were only receiving the micronutrients itself, right? And that's because we have so many deficiencies in our body, in our gut, that need to be corrected first, which quite
Yeah.
often lead to anxiety, stress,
Right.
panic
Right.
disorders, mood
Right.
disorders, depression, etc. So if we can
Yeah.
heal our body from the inside out and address the root cause, as we say
Yeah.
in functional medicine, that will
Yeah.
allow us to be better versions of ourselves.
Can you say the book's name again? I think somebody wants to know the
It's
name.
called The Better Brain,
The
and the
better
two
brain.
authors are Bonnie Kaplan and
Hmm.
Julia Ruckledge.
Got it. Got it. Got it. That's awesome. That's amazing. So tell me, like, do you like? Are you very good with following those 5 things yourself? Like making sure you sleep well, even if you've had a stressful day. What do you think about like? Many times I personally would pop a melatonin or like do something to sleep when I'm jet lagged or when I'm tired or um, maybe have a glass of wine or maybe like just like snack on something. What are your thoughts on some of those cheat modes that we get into?
So look, I'm quite authentic and disciplined with
Yeah.
how I lead my life because I've seen how much of a difference it made to me recovering through a very significant illness. And I try to sort of be strict with the rules that I set for myself. Um,
Hmm.
we should all have cheat days. I have ice cream. I enjoy ice cream. I
Hmm.
enjoy a drink every now and again when I'm catching up with my friends.
Yeah.
But we need to understand that cheat days shouldn't become regular days.
Right.
And when faced with a significant challenge, like
Hmm.
being very exhausted and tired, we should resort to natural therapies or interventions which address the root cause rather than try and plaster over the cracks. So I use
Right.
melatonin when I'm traveling very significantly across time zones.
Hmm.
I use melatonin in my athletes who are just completing a very significant game, either preparing for the Olympics or an IPL match, etc. But the day-to-day utilization of melatonin is very dangerous in individuals who are just using it from a sleep enhancing perspective. So, like the same thing, alcohol, because you mentioned it,
Yeah.
alcohol can make you feel drowsy, but it
Yeah.
is actually a drug
When you sleep.
which
Yeah.
interferes with the sleep architecture. So you actually
Correct.
sleep much worse because of it.
Totally.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So can I talk to you a little bit about you know since I run Brain Bristle and I understand like everything that I see because I've been in this field for so long, I see it from either my lens or from the lens of autism. So what have been some of the toughest cases that you've seen in your journey of patient care or working with OVA and CXOs? What have been some of your toughest cases? What has been their prognosis journey? Yeah.
I think the hardest thing I find is time management. We all live in a time-starved world, and unfortunately, we tend to only have time for the things we consider important. So everyone who ever tells me, "Oh, doc, I wish I could do that. I just don't have time to go for a run or to cook my own meals," that's ridiculous because if the
Yeah.
president of the USA, if the Pope can find time to go for a run, there's no reason why you can't find time to do some daily exercise as
Sure.
well.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's the first thing is educating them. It's about aligning them mindset to understand why these things are important. And once they understand why it's important, it automatically becomes a priority and they will automatically create time in their day to
Yeah.
engage with those particular activities, right? So
Yeah.
that's the biggest challenge that I see as a common thread across all the people that I work with. I think individually, the two or three biggest things that I see now day to day, one is a massive explosion in cardiometabolic disease, insulin resistance, coronary vascular disease, hypertension, fatty liver, PCOS. These are all part of the same spectrum, cardiometabolic disease. India has over 25% obesity rate, over 40% pre-diabetes rate. We've got a massive explosion on our hands, and that's a big challenge that I see in day-to-day practice. The other thing that I see a lot more of, as we were talking about earlier, are autoimmune conditions from poor gut health, inflammatory health, rheumatoid disease, other forms of autoimmune disease, migraine, sinusitis, rhinosinusitis, etc. So that's another big sort of category. I think the third big chunk are deviations in our hormonal health. So subclinical hypothyroidism, low testosterone levels, particularly in men, uh, early perimenopause or premenopause in women. Again, another big category of things. So I would say these are probably the three big things that I'm seeing a lot more of today.
Can I ask you a little bit about so food, the food industry, I don't know about anything else, but at least in the space of autism, the food industry has become $1 billion industry. um what do you like I know you just spoke about not eating packaged food and all of that, but what are your thoughts on just the explosion of capitalism in the space of food and this like Ozempic and this and that? Like, what are your thoughts on some of that stuff?
Funny you ask. I'm currently reading this book, Ultra Processed People,
Right,
why we eat what we
right,
eat.
right, right,
And
right.
ultra processed food is probably the biggest killer that we have in society today. It's addictive, it's high in salt, high in sugar, high in fructose,
Yeah.
low in nutrients. I remind people it's probably healthier to eat the packaging than it is the contents because at least you'll get some fiber from the box that way. It's a big problem. So, yes, this needs to be addressed. I think because we are intrinsically lazy, we
Yeah.
find or look for short term or very easy to administer solutions. Ultra processed food is one of them. Ozempic or the GLP-1 inhibitors are another, and these are basically a class of drugs which cause a false state of satiation, i.e., you feel full. It activates various metabolic pathways in the body, which can lead to a reduction in appetite and therefore a drop in weight. Very significant effects I've seen. I've got clients who are in our programs who are also on Ozempic or Manjaro from their endocrinologist. So we work alongside them to provide them with the nutritional and the lifestyle support that needs to be given. I think it's a very interesting class of drugs with potentially quite significant alterations to society in first order and second order. I'm actually just writing an article on this, which I will be publishing in the next 3 to 4 weeks on my LinkedIn handle. But essentially, apart from the first order effects, which is a reduction in appetite and reduction in food craving, and therefore reduction in weight, we are also now seeing second order effects. Women are becoming more fertile because they're losing weight. So pregnancies are going up. Men and women are actually having sex more because of better body image. So that's an interesting trend.
Interesting.
Addictive behaviors are on the decline. So people are becoming less addictive to biting their nails, drinking or consuming substance abuse,
Right.
etc., because it's sort of satiating that pathway as well. We're seeing a reduction in stocks for companies like Walmart and some of these high food retail stores, because there are sales declines happening in certain populations which consume a lot of these foods. So I think it's going to be an interesting space to monitor. Apart from the first order physiological benefits, these sort of societal changes that will happen because of the percolation of this class of drugs as well.
Got it. Makes sense. That's super interesting. It's probably interesting, and I think a lot of this is in a part of society, but I think there's still a lot of India, and there's a lot of still many other developing countries that are still catching up and figuring it out and doing all kinds of other things. But yeah, no, that makes complete sense. And lastly, I'm really curious to hear about this complete rise in food allergies, lactose allergy, gluten allergy, casein free. I mean, like 12, 14 years ago, I started something called the gluten-free, casein-free kitchen for autism, and then I was like, I don't understand this stuff. But I'm curious, like, what do you think has caused such a big rise in all these grain-free diets? Everyone's on keto these days. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, the advantage of, I mean, the problem with keto is that keto is basically low carb, but you can eat as much fat as you want.
Yeah.
And you have people literally pounding away whole slabs of butter and packets of bacon and ice cream
Right.
tubs because it's low carb and low cal. The benefit of a low carb, high protein, high fat diet when eaten in real food and sustainably is actually very effective, particularly in people with cardiometabolic disease. So I'm on that myself. I use that quite a lot with the individuals who I look after, because insulin resistance is such a big problem in society today. I think the reason why we're seeing so much autoimmune changes is the quality of food has just tanked.
Yeah.
We are all effectively, I mean, the simple thing of the wheat we eat today is structurally a dwarf variety, which is not the wheat that used to be grown even as far back as 1970s, right? Those were the long grain. So we're now in a state of the world where agricultural output and production is such a key commodity that we are genetically and physically altering the crops that we grow, and therefore the food that we consume, at the expense of our health and our human bodies for a commercial profit. So those are some of the reasons why we're seeing so much allergy, environmental changes, air levels, water toxicity, microplastics, sound levels. There's just so much pollution that exists around us in society that it's really eating away and breaking down our insides. Our physiology is always in a high fight or flight state. Our immune system is always switched on, and that's leading to these cross-link, cross-reactions to otherwise normal proteins, which we should have been able to consume, but which we
Yeah.
now can't consume, leading to so much food allergy as well.
That's interesting, right? Like that. That's so you think it's a product of our environment that all of these allergies and all of this market has basically expanded that much.
Absolutely. It's
Yeah.
nature is now hitting back at us hard, and we're
Yeah.
gonna face the consequences of that very, very quickly in a massive way. Yeah.
That's super cool. Um, what anything else like the what have been like some interesting things? Any interesting stories that you want to share about your journey of being a medical officer and like coaching high performers? Because honestly, Dr. Marcus, when I 4 years ago I was at the World Economic Forum and I met lots of grown thinkers and speakers who were on the spectrum of autism, who were neurodiverse, who were holding, things about that. So I know that they've made long, difficult, uh, journeys of advocacy, asking for space, asking for certain rights for them, fighting for quota in certain ways. What have been some of like your interesting coaching journeys thus far?
Um, it's a difficult one to say without.
I mean, just like even just an overview without like really talking about specific people.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think the fundamentals remain the same, right? In terms of those five basic prongs that we just described.
Hmm.
I think one of the things which keep us excited about is the fact that data
Hmm.
is now becoming so much more accessible. So it's
Hmm.
not just about me telling you, do this because it's good for you. I
Hmm.
can show you why it's good for you and
Hmm.
how your health is improving because of that.
Hmm.
Whether it's your sleep markers using a easy wearable device and our homegrown
Hmm.
mobile app Mito that we've built, whether it's the before and after on your blood values,
Hmm.
whether it's the changes that we see in your gut microbiome and the physical characteristics of your skin condition,
Hmm.
or your symptomatic ability to, snoring at night or
Hmm.
sleep disturbances, etc. So objective and subjective data can now be shown to people using simple at-home diagnostics and wearables.
Hmm.
And that's unlocking biology for people because it's not this abstract idea limited to the brain of the doctor, which an
Hmm.
individual episodically dips in and out of when she is sick.
Hmm.
It is now a real living continuous data stream that
Hmm.
an individual can participate in proactively
Hmm.
to keep themselves at their human edge, at their
Hmm.
highest level of performance
Hmm.
for as long as possible.
Hmm.
And that itself is a really exciting journey, and it keeps the team and I very, very enthusiastic and motivated to keep doing what we do.
Okay, so this is super cool. So just to kind of end to bring us to an end, talk a little bit about the human edge. I know like a lot of what you spoke about was the work that you do with Human Edge, but like what does the Human Edge, your book, and what is the work of the Human Edge?
So the Human Edge is a company, it's a longevity science company dedicated to help people live healthier every day.
Hmm.
We have a fundamental, I started it because of my frustration with the sick care model of health and wanting to disrupt it by making health an everyday activity,
Hmm.
which is preventative, personal, proactive
Hmm.
for the individual to consume, right? So we've built a solution. Anyone who's watching this can visit our website. It's
Hmm.
ever.humanedge.co. That's
I'll link
India's
that.
first ever, yeah, India's first ever longevity solution. So you can start with a very simple at-home blood test where we study your body and we then provide you with a blueprint of how to improve your health. And that's the starting point. We can go much deeper. We have wearable devices, we have a mobile app, we have a clinical dashboard, we have in-house team of medical doctors and health coaches and nutritionists and psychologists that can work with you to improve your health as well. So that's what we do at Human Edge. So anyone interested can follow the handle or visit our website and live healthier today so that they can have a healthy tomorrow as well.
No, that's awesome. That's super, super, super cool. Anything else you'd like to share while you're at it? Because I know that while this is interesting from an propelling autism forward, but I think most people these days are perfectionists, high performers, want to be doing their best. So this is all so helpful. So anything else that you want to share before we? How about rotis? Like if these days people are like giving up carbs, no rice, no roti. Like, what are your thoughts on all of that stuff?
So, as I shared, I'm on a pretty low carb diet. I am very grain free. I'm completely gluten free. I'm pretty much grain free as much as I can. Whenever we eat grain at home, it is millets and jawar, bajri, ragi rather than maida and wheat, etc. Sort of going back to your question, I would probably want to end by reminding people that yes, being healthy is an important everyday activity. It doesn't need to wait until you're unwell to see your doctor. You can see your doctor when you're well so that you stay healthy for a long period of time. But I think sort of weaving it into the narrative that we started around is the importance of self-compassion and sort of self-care, right? In the same way that we look after our devices and our machines and our cars and our fancy phones and fancy watches and all these ridiculous materialistic items that we have in our lives, we've forgotten to look after the main machine that we've been given by nature. And so, spending a little time every day on yourself will go a long way towards you having a healthy, long, and hopefully happy future as well.
And that's amazing. And can I ask you one last question, which is the human edge, right? Like, do you think like how do people find balance? Because it's easy to like push yourself a little. And there was a question about this, can the human edge actually cause mental health challenges and issues because you don't know how much you can push yourself, how much you can propel yourself ahead? What's the
So
limit
we
and how do you
we
figure
we
that?
should all find our limits
Hmm.
and strive to extend beyond that limits, because one of the fundamental problems we have in society today
Hmm.
is everyone is just too damn comfortable being comfortable, right? It's leading to a loss of resiliency, a loss of grit, environmental damage, all kinds of things. So
Yeah.
hormetic stress is a biological principle where you find the limits of an organism and then you allow it to push beyond that, because that's where growth happens. Growth never happens in your comfort zone. Growth
Yeah.
only happens when you stretch beyond your
Totally.
comfort zone. So I
Totally.
think that's an important facet. And look, I'm not a big believer of balance, but I'm a
Hmm.
massive believer of harmony.
Yeah.
And the idea of harmony is that we can each be doing two or three key things, and it'll constantly sort of undulate in the same way that a musical instrument, the string of an instrument, requires a certain degree of torsion and stress for it to produce that melodic sound. And it can only happen when the stress is applied. Any little stress and it'll just wobble, too much stress and it'll snap, right? That is harmony in action. Your body is exactly the same. So don't get too wound out with balance. Ensure that you have a better harmony in your life.
That's amazing. There's one last question. Your premises you depend on devices. So how about like your like device dependency for human edge development?
No, I'm not dependent on devices. What I am a favor and fan of is data, because data leads to insight.
Hmm.
I was taught in med school, you can't treat
Yeah,
what you
yeah,
can't
yeah.
measure, right?
Totally, totally.
That's it. So whether you want to wear a fancy device or not, I don't
Yeah.
care too much about that. What I care about is showing you what's your biology today, where do we want to get to, and opening your world, opening your eyes to the inside, and therefore seeing how much you've grown through that period of time.
Yeah, no, no, I love that. And I mean, as somebody who's in the space of autism and neurosciences, I do a lot of measurement of data and impact and monitoring and evaluation. So I think that makes complete sense. But also to find a balance with that, how much do you do? Anything else before we close out? Because this is so helpful. I think a lot of my uh, you know people who I know from all other industries are going to suddenly be after you. So be prepared because this is like what we talk about at every dinner. So I think this is helpful for autism because this is the work that I'm trying to do to push them into balance and harmony and success and future growth. But this is so true for anyone who listens. So this is
Thank
fabulous.
Thank you.
Any
I'm glad
helpful
I've been able
process?
to contribute. No, I'm glad I've been able to hopefully contribute. I'm very active on LinkedIn and on Instagram. So
Got
anyone
it.
who's interested in knowing more, you can connect with me. We can
I'll
talk
do
more
that.
about the program and take it from there.
That's awesome. Do you have time to answer one last question? That's about the triggers that cause inflammation in the body. And have you seen that, and what has been your work with that?
So there are internal triggers and external triggers. Internal triggers can be divided into foods, organisms, different other types of infectious agents that can trigger these things. Stress levels can trigger it as well. And then, of course, the external triggers are the pollutants in the atmosphere, exposure to certain toxins, etc. So typically, when we measure inflammation, we have a pretty long list of biomarkers that we're measuring from the blood and from digital devices as well. And we try to identify what the probable 2 or 3 causes are, including food, pollutants, and toxins. And then it's about eradication, allowing the body to heal itself from the inside out, and then repeating an exposure to see if we've made an effort towards that or not. Yeah.
That's awesome. Super helpful. Super, super, super helpful. Amazing. Cool. This is
All
this
right.
is really, really helpful, and just like a lot of good food for thought and food to think about as we put into our bodies. But thank you so much. This was fabulous. I'll put the link to the website and to your LinkedIn and to the book that you mentioned all in the notes. So
Thank you very
thank you.
much.
All
All right.
right.
Thanks, everyone. Take
Amazing.
care.
Thank you.
Bye.
I hope to do work some more with you in the future. But thank you so much. This was amazing,
Thank you.
Doc. Thank you. Bye. Take care.
Bye. Bye. Bye.